So here I am playing with the Nitrous solenoid. This is the Quadranoid. It's kind of hard to see, but it's a single solenoid with a distribution block basically built in to the base of it. I got this thing flipped upside down so my distribution block is on top, and you can look inside and maybe see a set screw, and there's a cap. This cap here with an O-ring normally is in place, so if you engage that solenoid, nitrous will come shooting out the top unless the cap is in place, in which it pushes the nitrous out to each edge, to each nozzle line, and you can screw these little jets in. So here's one of the connectors that's loose right now, and that threads into the body here, and then these little jets thread into the end before you thread it into the body. So it's kind of a nice engineering design. The Quadranoid Wizards of NOS have figured that out. But you can see that the hole is incredibly tiny for a 15 horsepower jet, and it's assuming that you're getting probably the full 1000 or 900 psi through the solenoid right to the jet to push the equivalent of 15 horsepower through this little jet. And I'm going to put that jet in my pocket before I lose it, but the bottom line is I'm only getting about a quarter of that. So the way I determined that is I kept on turning down the fuel until when I hit the nitrous I wouldn't get a rich condition. So when I got down to around 7 pounds of fuel per hour, which is roughly a 15 horsepower total for the engine, then it was just about right. So you can test the nitrous system by basically being part throttle and then hitting the nitrous. The engine should rev aggressively when that happens, and this thing, it revs, but it doesn't rev super aggressively. So what I'm doing is and the problem likely is, and if I don't, where is it here? Oh yeah, here it is. So this is my nitrous line. It's a 5mm OD, probably 1.5mm ID nylon line, and it runs all the way through inside, across the inside of the dash, down through the frame, back up, and down and around and across over to the nitrous bottle. So it's probably 25 or 30 feet, and it does have a coupler midway because I ran out of line, and that coupler probably isn't perfect, so I'm losing quite a bit of pressure. So what I'm doing is I'm going to use the adjustability of this solenoid to control the flow and just get rid of the jets entirely. So the jets were always optional, but I wanted to put them in just as a safety, and I benchmarked the system in several videos ago, 2 years ago, and basically showed that I had the whole system set up perfectly for 60 horsepower, but not with the length of the line that I ended up using. So I'm going to finish pulling out all the jets, put it all back together, turn the nitrous plunger down so that the solenoid isn't flowing a huge amount of fuel or nitrous, and then just see where it is by, again, testing to see how much fuel I need to get it to be spot on fuel to air ratio, and then slowly turn that plunger out until I get to the power I need. It's interesting that even with the 15 horsepower addition that this has, the car likes to hunt around in second gear when it comes onto the cam. It wants to sort of, if that road surface isn't perfectly level, it wants to start moving around, and this car accelerates pretty aggressively as it is, and it's a bit of a handful. So I'm starting to get a little paranoid about this nitrous being kind of a good thing or not. So we'll see. I'll inch up on it and decide exactly how much power I really want to put down, and not get myself to a point where I'm going to crash this car when I accelerate. So anyway, I'm going to try to go to the track again Friday, but it looks like rain. We'll see. So I'm going to do some nitrous testing. Again, I've removed the jets from the Quadranoid solenoid, and a couple things, by the way. So bottle is relatively cold right now. It's 760 psi, and I'm going to turn on the pusher system in a sec, and then I'm going to readjust. I had it set a little high. I had it at 1000 or 1050 psi at the track, and then when the sun hit the bottle, it moved it up to about 1200 psi, which is a bit too high, and then the purge solenoid wouldn't work. And it turns out that these purge solenoids have got, it's kind of a safety feature basically, where you have too much pressure in the system and the solenoid won't actually work. It kind of overrides it, and it keeps the solenoid from lifting the pintle up. So anyway, I'm just going to turn the nitrous push on first and adjust. So I've got a software control here in the dash to do that. So you can hear it turning on. Just want to see whether or not I've got it already set. I'm going to turn that screw down a bit. I thought I turned it down quite a bit, but it was got to get in there and turn it down lower. Okay, so I don't want it to go above 950. So we're getting some surges. It's 900. I think I might leave it at 900 actually. So I'm going to run the system for 5 seconds and then weigh the bottle. It's currently 12.4 pounds, and we'll see how much nitrous it flows. So I'm not going to run the engine. I'm just going to get in here and I'm going to enable the nitrous system, and then all I need to do, if you go back to the previous page, when my throttle position hits 95%, it should engage the nitrous once the nitrous system is on, and then I time it for 5 seconds. Okay, so nitrous system is engaged, and then I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I'll measure it. So let me just get my iPhone counter out. I need my hand, so I'm going to set this camera down so you can just see the nitrous flowing out the, probably you'll see the nitrous flowing out of the throttle bodies if everything goes well. So let's go to my timer and I'll get exactly 5 seconds. Okay, now I'm going to go weigh the bottle. Weigh the bottle, zero the scale, grab the bottle, drop it on the scale. Let's see what she weighs in at. This is 12.2, so it's used 1/4 pound in 5 seconds. So I'll do a 10-second blast now and get a little bit more of an accurate resolution. I just wanted to do 5 seconds firstly because you just don't know whether it's going to empty the whole bottle in 5 seconds, because I had the jets completely removed, but it looks like it hasn't. So anyway, should be ready, set. All right, 10 seconds. So let's see what this says now. Yeah, 11.6, 11.5, 11.6. This is going to be plus minus 0.1 or 2. So, yeah, 12.2 to 11.6. That's 60 horsepower, which is what I wanted. So 60, 70 horsepower, it's in that range. So do one more test. I'll do 10 seconds at 50% on duty cycle, and hopefully it will be half that amount, and then I'll know I can control the flow adequately with the pulse width modulation. So yeah, so we're getting quite a bit of pressure drop through that long nylon line. So moral of the story is, if you want to go more than 60-70 horsepower with a long line, you're going to have to use at least an AN4 line. They also make nylon in 1/8 internal ID diameter, which would be awesome. Much larger this thing is probably less than a 1/16 or around a 1/16 internal diameter on the line. So there you go, there's the upper limit of how much you can flow from the trunk. That was my problem. Well, nothing's perfect, including my Wizards of Nitrous Quadranoid. The original one is here, dismantled. That's just the housing. So the way they work, there's a coil obviously that energizes the plunger, and the plunger is basically so this is sitting in the core, and this moves. There's a spring, a return spring on the base of it that pushes this is the seat up against a little nozzle. So this sits up at the top. So here, this piece is threaded in here, and it rests. So this piece, when it's upside down, and there's the Teflon seat. These things are normally with the spring held against each other, and then when the coil is engaged, it will lift the seat back, and then the nitrous will flow through the port, through this little hole, through the top, and then out to the distribution block at the top. And you know, you probably can't see very well, but this down, see if I get in fairly close and focus, this blue surface, this Teflon surface, has a dimple in it. It shouldn't have a dimple, it should be just flat. So I had been screwing the seat up and down, changing the plunger height, you know, how far the solenoid needs to move, so I can increase the frequency and control the nitrous flow by computer a little more accurately. And when you over tighten it, you are forcing this metal cone into the Teflon, and you're distorting the surface and damaging it. So I did two things. I tore the O-ring to shreds by especially when it was all frozen up after a bunch of testing. I'd be adjusting it, and so the frost was causing the O-ring to stick. And you're not allowed to use oil or grease with nitrous, otherwise you create an explosive material hazard. So yeah, so these O-rings can be a little delicate, especially when there's frost and the whole thing's really cold and all the materials have shrunk because of temperature. I bought another solenoid. Bottom line, it was just easier. I mean, they're going to send me some. I bought some O-rings online. These little 6mm by 1 O-rings, a couple different styles. This one's silicone, and this is sort of regular rubber. Doesn't really matter. Silicone's a little more impervious to abuse, I think. I'm not a material scientist, so what do I know? But that's what it tells me, is that these are more resistant to the oxidization effects, the solvent effects of the nitrous. Nitrous is a very good organic solvent, so it'll eat certain things, although not typically rubber seals. Anyway, on the latest versions of the Quadranoid, this is actually made out of plastic. So it's plastic pushing down on Teflon. I bought this from a US supplier because I didn't have time to get it from the UK, and it's the previous version like mine, which has the metal one. So we'll see how long it lasts. It's supposed to last forever, but you know, rule number 1 is don't crank the seat down too hard. So I sort of feel a little bit of tension, and what I do is I just test the solenoid. See, you can hear it click, 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 and it stops clicking. You know you've bottomed out by applying power to the solenoid. So to get this thing to flow without jets in it, just the right amount of nitrous, sort of under 80 horsepower, in that 60 horsepower range, I need this seat almost all the way closed. And you open it all the way up, you get well over 100 horsepower, depending on how long your line is. In my case, my line is only going to support about 120 horsepower from the bottle at the very back of the car with my very small nylon line. Anyway, I'm going to throw this in now, put it back together, do some nitrous testing tomorrow, because I've got 3 days of racing ahead of me. I've got the drag racing on Friday, and I bought a car dolly to tow behind my Toyota Highlander, my GTI, so I can load the GTI onto the car dolly and then tow it around by the rear wheels, and then take it over to Vancouver Island to the motorsport circuit, where I'm working with the Hoosier engineers and the A7 race tires I have for the car. So we're going to get lots of track time on the GTI finally, and see how it performs, accelerating, braking, cornering, and all that stuff. So it should be a very interesting week ahead of me. Hopefully nothing breaks, and hopefully everything goes according to plan. So I've got the new solid motor mounts in, and it's not so bad. I thought it would shake the car to pieces, but it's actually could be worse. And I've also done some testing of the nitrous, and there's been no traction in second gear with 100% flow on the nitrous, so it's been like shredding the tires in second gear. It holds in third but not second on the street tires. So anyway, I will be testing it again in a minute. I've made some changes. And
Okay, so I just wanted to show you guys the results of the nitrous testing using the data logger function of the Holly ECU software. So I'm just looking at the nitrous. If I click on this, this is the nitrous parameters. And so I'm currently got this thing set up so I trigger when the throttle's at 95%. I do not have a cutoff for rich or lean because there are momentary swings that go beyond the 15 and the 11 upper and lower fuel to air ratio limits. I'll explain that in a sec. So then I'm only running one stage, so I'll click on that and it's activated between 3 and 8300 RPM, and I've gone and set the maybe it's on the other screen actually. Let's see. No, let's see, it must be the screen here. Yeah, so this timing retard, and I've got it set at 4 degrees down at 3000 to 4000 basically, and then 3 degrees above that. That seems to be a reasonable amount of retard. And I've got a fuel delay of 0 milliseconds right now because I had the stock 125 millisecond delay or 150 millisecond delay, and I was ending up with a lean, like the nitrous comes on really quick, and my solenoid's pretty close to the inlet runners, and it actually beats the nitrous gets into the cylinder before the fuel does. So I was ending up, you'll see a little lean spike, and then it causes the system to try to compensate because I do have closed loop running. So this is a table that shows RPM versus pulse width, and I'm at 100% for my last test, and I'm at 35 hertz. I had gone up to the max at 50 hertz, but the solenoid doesn't respond as well. It starts to, I'll explain down here, it starts to float at higher frequencies and stay closed at lower frequencies, lower pulse widths. And the higher the frequency, the harder it is for the solenoid to follow the signal. So 35 seems to be the upper limit for the quadranoid. And you can see the nonlinearity here. I've been playing with this and tuning it since the last set of nitrous tests. So the way the solenoid is currently set up, I need 26 pounds of fuel when it's fully open. And it's basically fully open from about 75% onwards or 80% onwards. And that works out to about 62 horsepower. And then it stays closed below around 25%. And it's a little bit nonlinear. You can see there's a little bit of a curve here. And that's because when it starts to flow, it starts to flow more earlier on than being linear. So 50%, I'm flowing more like 40 something horsepower rather than 30. So anyway, this is the chart. I'm not exactly sure how much nitrous I'm going to use because you'll see from the video that in second gear at 100%, when that 60 horsepower comes on, it just immediately shreds the tires. So you can be at 40, 50 miles an hour and tap the throttle into the nitrous, and then bang, it spins the tires. It may still do that on the track with racing tires, racing slicks at the drag strip. So we'll see. I may have to run the nitrous. It's too bad I can't set it up so that I changed the pulse width depending on the gear I'm in. And I guess I could probably do that with some switches, but this is just not worth it. Anyway, the car feels a little bit out of control even in third gear with the 60 horsepower. You got to stay on top of it. It wants to wander a little bit. It's a lot of power for the front wheel drive car to manage at 300 plus horsepower. And it's like very high torque, so it's like an instant turbo hit. Anyway, let's go into the data logger logs here. So this is this blue square line here is the nitrous stage 1 activation. So it just goes boom up to 100%, and the RPM is in red. So I'm starting at about 4,000 RPM, climbing to about 6. And sorry, it's too bad there's two blue lines here. Fuel flow is blue, and you can see, by the way, and this isn't a perfect example, I'll pull up another one in a sec, but about 110, 115 pounds per hour of fuel flowing at 6,000 RPM, which is, versus 82 without the nitrous. So you can see it's flowing the full 60 horsepower worth of nitrous. There's my air fuel ratio, and you can see the nitrous turns on, and for about 0.1 of a second, I'm getting this lean spike, and that's going to be mostly eliminated because I've changed that nitrous delay to 0. So hopefully the fuel will compensate. And then when I just CL comp is the this other line here, and you can see how the CL comp it's trying to add more fuel, and then it settles down. So that momentary half-second kind of condition should dissipate. So I'm going to just back out and just show you one other. Let's see, which one should I chase down? Okay, we'll look at this one here. So this is another full throttle test. And then here's this can happen, right? Where the nitrous spikes lean, and then the system tries to compensate, and it takes a while to settle down to that 13-to-1 fuel to air ratio, which it gets to in the end. And again, you're doing roughly 6,000 RPM, and you've got, roughly 110 pounds of fuel. I'm going to show you going back. I'm going to zoom all the way out, and I'll go to just the part throttle test. So when I'm doing a part throttle test, what's happening is these are my part throttles at 100%. It's very, very hard to hold the throttle position exactly steady, and so the car surges forward, and you naturally take your foot off the throttle when the car surges forward. So I'll turn on TPS for a sec, and that's in yellow, and you can see that my throttle position is at 30% and it declines. So that's throwing the whole system off, and it's causing when you back off the throttle, it actually takes the CL, the compensation correction factor, and it kind of makes it go crazy. So you can see, again, there's my lean spike at the beginning, and my fuel to air ratio is all over the map because I've been backing out of the throttle and causing the CL comp to go crazy. So these part throttle tests aren't super valid, but they at least are a safe way to sort of try the nitrous before you're into it all the way with your throttle. You're not sort of stressing the engine too much. So I'm holding the throttle better here, and you can see, and this is before I tuned the nitrous, you get the spike, and then that causes the compensation to spike, and then it's trying to lean the fuel out by dropping down here, and you can see the fuel to air ratio is kind of struggling a little bit. So I've corrected all this now, but when I go all the way out, this first batch of tests is the 30%. This batch was 50%. This is 100%. And those are all at part throttle, and then these are all at full throttle at the end. And I'll just show you the full throttle ones again, where I was spinning the tires. Yeah, I think it's this one right here. Let me put speed on, see if this is it. Yeah, okay, so speed's in green. So you can see I'm in second gear here. The nitrous hits, and I get my tire slip right there. So you got to surge the nitrous, and even when it's running lean, you can well, just after it finishes running lean is when the tires really break loose. But the tires are already starting to break loose right at that initial hit there. So, and there's the RPMs, right? The RPM goes from 3,500 to 7,000 in under half a second. So it just shows you just like a blip, like bink, and it goes. So we'll see what this happens with the Lex. I sure hope I can get into the nitrous in second gear. on Friday. Anyway, my car dolly is confirmed to arrive, and I'm hoping it will be there Wednesday. I'll be picking it up Wednesday. All right, there you go.
Okay, so what's going on here? Brake ducts for the track. I got my DTC 60 Hawk pads for the track, high temperature pads. They weren't squealing actually. I bedded them in. Lots of dust because they're race pads, and when you bed any pads in you get a little dusty, but these ones are a lot dustier than stock pads, but they stop the car, which is awesome. Yeah, you can actually see there's we're getting good grip from, like they eat the rotors too, which is what you expect from a higher temperature, harder pad. But anyway, so I just made a little tiny bracket that grabs onto these duct flanges. Just cheap and cheerful. I didn't do a very nice job. I'll clean the brackets up. But anyway, then the scoop mounts. I got a little angled bracket that I'm going to mount underneath the where the engine cradle, that front brace is, and I'll bolt this on there, and then that'll suck air. Wrote it just to zap strap it to the underside of the control arm, and then up in here, and then when this is on, if I get this on one-handed, you can see how we're blowing air in kind of nicely. It's a little tight actually, but I'll make sure it's got clearance. But basically it's blowing air into the back of the disc, and trying to blow air through the center of the disc is impossible, but I'm getting close. So I'll get some air into the center and then it'll spin out, and yeah, anyway, it works. It's not perfect, but could be worse. Sorry, yeah, everything's dusty right now. I'll clean all this crap up in a bit. Yeah, so my brake ducts are complete. So I'll get under the car here. So there's a bracket mounted to the engine cross member, and then I bolt the funnels to them, and then the lines run to the back, and it works nicely. There's a gap of about just under 1/4 of an inch, and there's a good inch plus inside where there's a direct shot at the inside of the rotor where it's all important to get the air into. So it should pressurize that area and provide lots of airflow, and keep those Hawk DTC 60 race pads and rotors and everything in operating temperature range, which is kind of under 1,000 degrees is the kind of target. So there it is from the front. I'm going to leave them on for drag racing, even though it's going to slow me down, because I won't really have time to do the installation between the drag racing at Mission Raceway on Friday and the Sunday at Vancouver Island. So I got to take a ferry across and do a whole bunch of other things, so don't have time to wrench. Just want to put this thing on the dolly, and geez, I hope my dolly shows up Wednesday. Otherwise I think I'm screwed for the whole thing. Anyway, I did a bunch of nitrous testing, by the way, and the camera, that's the camera in the GoPro there. That camera, it's a sealed housing, so it was all muffled and you couldn't hear a word I was saying. So I'm going to reshoot the video because it was very interesting. I got the nitrous system working, and no traction in second gear. Boy, when you hit the full throttle in second gear, it just lights the tires up at any RPM in second gear. So that's with the street tires. So it's marginal whether it's going to hold with the slicks on the track. Holds in third gear though. Then you go from 60 to 100 miles an hour in about 2.5 seconds. So it's a sudden acceleration for sure. Bit of a wild ride, front wheel drive. I'm not sure this car can handle it. So anyway, that's what the rest of the week will tell. I'll redo some of that video and show you guys what the nitrous system is like on the road. Just a couple of quick tests, because I'm going to make a few more adjustments to the ECU settings and the nitrous jet settings. Yeah, so here's my handiwork. It's actually Ted at Chet Fab did the fabrication of the stands, so I can drive in a single car garage. I can just drive over the easy car lift and have the car positioned and then be able to lift it right away and not have to slide the lift in and out. And then you know, when I'm on Vancouver Island, where I'll be for the summer with the car, and it's a single car garage, so gotta have this. And it's more convenient here as well because I don't need to fiddle around with sliding in and out and interrupting my dear spouse. Got the second seat installed, so now we're looking the part, and we can go. I'll have an instructor. The Hoosier Tire Engineering people are hosting a couple of days at the Vancouver Island track, so I'll be able to test my A7 Hoosier slicks out, and with the engineering support, so that'll be kind of fun. I'm not sure I want to use the nitrous on the track because that may make the car a little bit out of control, but we'll see. I might just run it at 30% and throw 20 or 30 horsepower down the back straights, but we'll see. Anyway, so this is pretty much ready to go for the week of racing now. I got everything dialed and ready to rock.